everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Booth, Northeast Alabama softball edition of this week. Got Coach Joe Guthrie with us this week, along with myself and Phil Harrison. Coach, it seems like we'll be calling you Christopher Columbus instead of Coach Joe Guthrie, the way you're traveling around the Southeast and around the world playing everybody the
We
last
are.
couple of weeks.
We are. We've had. I mean, it. I think we're not making it. We didn't play well yesterday against Jacksonville State. Uh, you know, uh, Obviously played very well against Georgia Tech. We're up 3-1 in the seventh and tied them 3-3. I think they played two-run games against Tennessee the next day, and not that you can really compare scores, but we played very well. We're not really looking at the scoreboard as much as how we play. I think the fatigue bug bit us a little bit, but on Sunday, but we've got to get over that too, because when we get into the spring, it's 32 games in conference, and you're playing a 4-game series, and like this weekend we played 20 innings. We'll have a guaranteed 28 when we get into the spring. So we've got some work to do. We've got some really bright spots on our team. We certainly can be a really good team, maybe even a championship caliber team. I think that's within our grasp, but we're going to have to get mentally and physically tougher, as things go by, because that was kind of how the season is set up with all the traveling and the really good teams to play. And, we've done well, but, we certainly have room to grow for sure.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, the fatigue, all the traveling that you're doing, and it's great for you girls to be able to get out there, but from Mississippi down South Alabama, then over to Georgia and everything. Can you kind of see it in their eyes that they are getting a little bit fatigued right now?
Yeah. But I also think, every team I've ever been a part of that is championship worthy, and I think this group can do that. You've got to play through that. I think, Wallace last year in the NJCAA tournament played like 7 games in 2 days, or maybe 3. It was over. I forget how many day period, but that's a lot of games. Whether it was 2 or 3 days, it doesn't matter. And ended up finishing third, pretty respectable finish. And that's where you're going to be. So it's athletics at this level, no matter if it's the SEC or the NJCAA, it is not for the weak. And that's the way it ought to be. I mean, I think it's 7% of high schoolers actually get a chance to play college, something like it's under 1%, way under, that are at, power 4 type schools. So, really proud of our group for scratching and clawing. And, we played basically 500 ball the last 6 games or so against those type of teams, which is good. But it's not really that of us, being able to handle the speed, handle the, the adversity that comes with that, because if you're tired or there's a bad surface, or there's a bad umpire, or whatever, all the adverse things that happen, you've got to continue to play through that. And that's what we're still very young, and we're still trying to learn all that. So, I'm grateful for the experience. You don't like to go through days like yesterday, but I think it's necessary. We went through a really big high on Friday night and then a not so good day yesterday. And there are lessons in both of those, how to handle success. Hopefully we're going to bounce back. I think we will, from failure yesterday, and then go from there. So all that, I'm really grateful that we have a chance to do, this fall for sure.
Seeing that the girls have a little bit of fatigue and everything, even though it is fall ball right now, do you give them a little extra break sometime during this time?
Yeah, we had it allotted even before yesterday. We were going to take 2 days today and tomorrow, before we go into Sunday with UAH. We try to plan ahead of that as much as we can. We do believe in rest, but hey, if you're going to get rest, or we're going to do a lighter practice like we did Sunday, then you better show up and do what you need to do when you do it. So I think that's part of the, just part of the lessons that come out of things like this. And you have to remind yourself that just a very short time ago, the kids had never had any college experience. But that's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is we've got to continue to learn these lessons. When you're facing kind of the same sequence in the box, for example, and you've seen it, for 9 games, you've got to adjust. That's what the game is telling you that you have to do. And we're working through that. So, a lot of work to be done this week. We got to get better this week. This is the last 4-year school we're going to play on the schedule. So we want to get it together and finish strong for sure.
Phil, these kids have been traveling around the last few weeks. They probably feel like NBA players, city to city, from one day to the next. Don't really know where they're at, but they're on their bus and they're hustling and they're getting better every day, and it's going to make them a better team in the long run.
Oh yeah, I think too. And, and they grow close together as a team. Also traveling together, they go through the ups and downs together. Well, Coach, talking about that, and I know their schedule's grueling, and you want it that way because you want them to get mentally and physically tougher. Sometimes during the regular season, you'll have games where you play an opponent that maybe is not quite as good as you are, and no games are easy, but it's good to see the girls kind of relax a little bit and kind of sort of, have everything go well for them, because sometimes the mental aspect can get grueling.
hmm Well, and the way we've been winning is probably the toughest way to do it. We've really leaned heavily on pitching and defense, and some of that is just because you're going to be at an offensive disadvantage as a JUCO against
Mhm.
the Sanfords and the Troys, and we've managed to have success, against Louisiana Tech, against Samford, against Georgia Tech the other night, all of whom are really good teams. But when you're winning 2-1, 1-0, those type of scores, you're going to have a game like we had yesterday where kind of on that side, I've seen it before. I remember we were a top 15 defense back in 2018 when I was at Louisiana Lafayette, and we didn't have a great offense that year, which is uncharacteristic of that program, but we just didn't have one. And, I think we were on an 8-game winning streak going into the Sun Belt, and I think 3 of those wins were 1-0, and 4 of those wins were in extra innings. And that team won 41 games at the end of the year, and I think 22 of those were 1-run games. And then the Sun Belt Championship game against Texas State, we just sort of blew up defensively, and it's not supernatural. That when you're playing that way and you don't have a lot of cushion sometimes offensively, you will see that happen because the pressure kind of gets to you. We've got to get better offensively. I think that's going to happen. I wouldn't say it's been awful. It's been inconsistent. I thought Georgia Tech, we did a really nice job against that crew. We did a really nice job against Louisiana Tech in the Samford games, even though we came out of there with a win and a tie. Not a lot of offense either way. And then yesterday we didn't do a very good job. So it's kind of been up and down. And it was similar when we went to Louisiana. Didn't swing the bat well against McNeese. Swung the bat great against Louisiana Tech. So we've just got to find a way to get more consistent. Part of that is, on us, rolling people in and out. You got people that are getting 2 at bats, 1 at bat, 3 at bats, 0 at bats. And you're flipping the lineup up a lot. And, anybody that knows the game knows, you're trying to find 9 or 10 players in there that are going to get together and score runs and work as a group to do that. Harder to do that when you're moving them in and out. So that's part of it too. But there's a lot we've got to clean up on the individual side as well. And, this is the time of year we've got to really pour a lot of effort into doing that for sure.
Well, Coach, do you feel like that at the plate, naturally, if you don't get a lot of at bats and you're only going to get 1 or 2 at bats, and do you think sometimes you try too much?
Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, there's some of that, and just not understanding, not having, we've got a couple kids, for example, Sophia Murphy and Sierra Walding that have done a lot of that. They've been pinch hitters. They've been platoon kids. They got through all that last year. So, we've used them a lot on the back end of games in an offensive role. They've done very well. And that's a lot of it just has to do with experience. They've been in those situations. A lot of our freshmen struggle a little bit doing that. And that's not unexplainable. It's just getting your feet wet. And that overall, when you step back and look at it, that's the most valuable thing we're gaining out of all this. And it's difficult. We try to make it the most difficult schedule in junior college softball. If it is, I know there's a couple others I don't think there's anybody in a region that does what we do. There's a couple others nationally that get pretty close. So, that's by design. And, the other reason for it is everything with the rosters being cut at the Division I level. Everything is really, really, really competitive to get our kids seen and signed. And so we want to take advantage of every opportunity we can to do that because, it's just hard. It's harder now. So our kids have done a good job. I think they should be pleased with putting a name out there for themselves, but we've got a lot of work to do from here for sure.
Well, Coach, I want to ask you, when you're on road trips, I mean, naturally, you've got your staff. What do y'all kind of do to pass the time when you have the long bus trips? Do y'all kind of communicate with other people? What are some of the things y'all do to kind of pass the time on those road trips?
The time, at least in my experience, passes pretty naturally because it's constantly taken up, especially now with recruiting. I mean, just before I got on with you guys, I had 4 recruiting phone calls I had to deal with. I probably had 10 others. I mean, we're talking like, when I say phone calls, that's not even talking about that take, 5 minutes or more. Through the course of the day it heats up this time of year. If I had a magic wand, I would like to wrap up all of our games prior to October 15th, because typically now, the big showcase tournaments, obviously being right around Chattanooga, we're fortunate that we're close to a lot of those, but their window they get 6 weekends in the fall that allow for the D1s to go out on Saturday and Sunday. Now, what obviously we're unrestricted, but we are also somewhat subservient to that calendar because that's when the big tournaments with the best players are going to be held. So we had a good one, this past weekend. It's a little bit smaller, in Chattanooga, and, we played Friday. We played Sunday by design, so I could sneak up there on Saturday and see some teams. Georgia High School is in full swing. So all of that stuff is like in the purview of the phone. So as far as passing time, if I'm not doing this time of year, that is where we're knee deep in it. Obviously, Jimmy has the athletic director stuff he's got to deal with. Courtney's dealing with the academic side of all the players. Plus, she plans and runs our trips. And our daughter usually goes with us. So there's quite a lot going on, on those bus trips without really thinking about passing time, really. And obviously, we're trying to get, first and foremost, get prepared for the game as well. So lot going on for sure.
Coach, now that you're getting down toward the end of the season, I know you're giving the girls a couple of days off, but what are some of the things you try to do to kind of keep their head in it, so to speak?
I think this one is a little bit easier in a way because we didn't do very well. And so we've got to, continue to handle adversity and some speed and pressure on the defensive side. We've got to shore up a couple reads base running wides as well. And then on the offensive side, we just need to that's kind of an opposite approach. We need to kind of let off steam there a little bit, get back into just a really good headspace and cut it loose. I mean, we're just not. Some of that has to do with, you've got we have designated plans and approaches that we work on. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I started this was not a foreign language to players in the softball world. Even they had been, they practiced with their travel ball teams. They'd had some of that thrown in there. Now there's none of that. And for the last probably 5 to 10 years, whether it was in the SEC or here, trying to establish and work on approaches is one of the hardest things you have to do because it's so foreign to players when they get here. So that part has not been a surprise. And like I said, at times we've done a really good job. At times we haven't. And, we've just got to get it more consistent and also understand how to deal with that with all the other fatigue and grind elements too. So it's a lot we throw at, kids in their first year in the fall for sure.
Well, Coach, of course, softball has changed a lot, and we all know that. Back in the day, say the Monica Abbotts, she struck out 2 out of every 3 batters. Defense was not all that, it was important, but there was not a lot of plays in the field. The game's totally changed. Now you have a lot of plays in the field. Maybe you get 1 strikeout in inning. So hitting has become a huge part of softball now. And I think that's the part that has brought fans into softball is hitting now because, I like to see you're going to have great pitching, but I like to see those 5-3 games. They're a whole lot more exciting than those 1-0 games.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the offenses have I think the television networks would be lying if they didn't want it. You go back to baseball in '98, with the McGuire Sosa chase. I mean, obviously offense, kind of saved the game at that time, in the post strike days. A lot of people complain about the game now because there's not a lot of ball in play. There's not a lot of short game things, kind of added elements to the game. Softball, I feel like, has all of that. So, and we're shorter and faster, and so there's a lot of things that are advantageous from that standpoint. But yeah, the game's changed. I mean, when I first started, we've got eight pitchers on our roster. That would have been unheard of, 20 years ago. It's necessary now. I think Tennessee, is 6 or 7 deep. When I was looking at it the other day, A&M is 7 or 8 deep, even with the roster limits, because they know it really doesn't matter the level. I don't know that we had a bad hitting team in our conference last year, for example. It's just there's a lot of offense. So, things like how you position, how you sequence hitters, your ability to defend, obviously your ability to be able to, play complementary softball and match runs when they're put on you. All those things are more in the forefront than they were, a short time ago, relatively speaking, in our game.
Well, Coach, on that says going back to recruiting, and you say you do a lot of phone calls and I'm sure sending a lot of text messages. What are you telling athletes this time of year?
Well, we're kind of in that's changing as well. We have a little bit different philosophy than a lot of people at this level. We've had some success being able to turn around 4-year kids, whether it's a traditional bounce back that's already been there or somebody that is real close to, going to a 4-year school and they end up with us. And, the sell of that is what's happening to the freshmen right now at the 4-year level. And, we're not going after somebody that's just, say, maybe interested in playing a little college and then hanging it up. We want somebody that is driven to go to the next level. We feel like that's, what we're trying to do, first and foremostly here, to have the best team. And we feel like we're going to have the best individuals come in as a result of having that as a principle. So, we're basically using the same recruiting blueprint that we used at UAB. We're going after a lot of the same athletes. I mean, there were some people that saw our team at Samford and said, I don't know that your team, they're younger, but I don't know that they're every bit as good as the cut two that you had, at UAB. And those were pretty good teams, when I was there. I mean, we were in a Conference USA final, my first year. So those, and it's showing up on the scoreboard too, with being able to beat, D1s and do those kind of things. So I do believe that, and I think that's a byproduct of what we're trying to do, and we're just trying to make it very, resonant with the potential player, the prospective student athlete, that there is an alternative path here if you want to get better, and you'll get a shot to play. The fact that we're playing 30 games in the fall and then another 70 in the spring, you may not play all those games, but by the time you get done with the practice and the plays and the scrimmages, you're going to be better prepared at the end of your freshman year than you would be if you went, to a 4-year, because either you will catch fire and be on the field a lot, or you may not be, and your development is going to be slowed. They don't have as much practice time as we do. And then you very well may, in today's day and age, immediate day and age with, DSA and the roster cuts and all that, you may get recruited over and they may be kind of a casualty of the portal. So, those are things that we're trying to make known, and we feel like we have something unique here to offer. And, you're starting to see some of the benefits of that this fall as well.
So I guess basically what you're saying, you're trying to build relationships, but you're also letting the student athlete know what to expect to make for certain they're interested in Northeast College.
Yeah, and we're aiming higher. We're not looking at a kid that, like I said, that there's nothing wrong with somebody that thinks, oh, I may just want to play for another 2 years, but that's not really what we're after. And I feel like that is kind of run of the mill junior college thought process for us. We want to be, especially the investment that we've made into this, we want to try and be the best. and we feel like we've got a formula to do that. I mean, it's unheard of that, the Georgia Gatorade Player of the Year would end up here. We've got some other kids that are pretty close to that kind of talent level. And, we're only in year 2. For that to happen, I think is a big statement. And, we're trying to recruit over that. That's what we're looking to do. So, that's a challenge, but I also think it's pretty cool that we've got some players that are, able to challenge D1s and in some cases beat D1s and with all the added resources they have in this day and age. Like when we were, closed out 7 innings with Georgia Tech the other day, up 3-1. And I told our kids, I said, you guys beat them and they have NIL. They have all kind of advantages that, I'm not saying we don't have that, but we're not on the same scale as those guys. And that's pretty incredible, that you can do that. We've got to learn how to handle that kind of success. And we've got to learn how to handle, the grind that comes with that and continue to be the best that we can be. But all those are things that we want to make sure our team knows and the perspectives know and build on it for sure.
Well, Coach, as the fall season ends up, I know you've talked about some of the young ladies you've been impressed with, some that needs work on some things. Who are some of the young ladies that continue to really impress you as the fall season goes along and very consistent?
Well, our most consistent, you start in the circle. Obviously, Addie Edwards has had a great fall. She's been right there with trading blows with the Mississippi States and the Georgia Techs of the world and others. Erin Harrelson has thrown extremely well the last 3 outings. She threw well against Jacksonville State yesterday. Threw well in the Sanford series as well, threw well against Georgia Tech. So real pleased with her development. Hallie Haynes is one that, we weren't sure how she was going to go. We knew we had a lot of work to do. We knew she had some tools. She threw very well in both games this week. I'm real pleased with that. And Skylar Branch continues to get better, who was on our team last year. Also had 2 good outings. She didn't have her best stuff against Georgia Tech and battled her way out of that, which is something I don't think she would have done a year ago. So that's been good to see. Kylie Weston in center field has been outstanding for us. And that's not a surprise. She's gotten better every practice, every game since she's been here. Her process is just to go 100% all the time. She's done well. I thought Olivia Acuff competed really well this weekend, particularly at Georgia Tech. Had a big, we took the lead. I think it was in the 3rd inning on a double she had with 2 outs in 2nd and 3rd. Really held her own there, played good defense for us at 2nd and 3rd base. So she's coming along, kind of late surge kid. We've got some kids that, like Lorelei Sullivan and Savannah Cantrell that have shown, freshman moments and have shown some brilliance, which is not Marty McCluskey, Austin McNeese, kind of the same category, in the infield. Morgan Perkins has been very, very good, especially defensively for us at shortstop. So, those are, and, we know Chloe Hatch is going to swing the bat. She's been pretty good for us all year. She had a home run to lead off the game against Sanford. She hit 425 last year. She's been fine, even with, some challenging pitching, obviously. And, we're real pleased with the catching play with Francesca Lump and Cantrell and McCluskey, and Sophia Murphy's contributed to that. And, we feel like we've got a lot of people that can help us. We've just got to figure out, we're still a long way off from figuring out who our best 9 are and not just our 9 best. There's a difference. So we're getting to where that's going to be that's going to be an ongoing process, and, we'll see where it goes for sure.
Well, Coach, being a new program, naturally, you worry about the attrition part of things because, kids come in, they decide this isn't for them, they move on. The goal, I guess, at a junior college level is you want these young ladies to come in and spend that full 2 years. Is that kind of a goal as a staff?
Yes and no. We don't, if a kid, we don't shut a door. There are programs that do what I'm about to say. We don't shut a door on a kid. If they've got a good look after year 1 to jump, then go. If we feel like that's a good fit, ultimately we're a springboard. Selfishly, yeah, we'd love to keep them all for 2, and we'd love to have them. But also there are circumstances that happen frequently. We don't ever want to try and get in a kid's way if they've got a good opportunity for them. Sometimes it's not the best opportunity after year 1. But but we certainly leave that door open, maybe more than some do, because I feel like if you do that, it just creates goodwill among you and, for lack of a better term, your customer base with recruits. The more we can move on to a higher level, the better. We're going to be pretty unselfish about that. That was part of why I coached in the league in Chattanooga last year too. It just opening up more doors for our kids. That's part of why we're doing the fall schedule, to open up more doors for our kids. So, all those in a perfect world, yes, we want them to come here and graduate and do that. Is that always reality? No. But for us, that's why it pays to constantly pound the pavement. Because if you do have something unexpected, you've got to have another card to turn over for sure. So, and that's kind of the nature of the junior college business always, historically. It's it's the nature of the 4-year business now too. If you're smart, nowadays, because it's just, look at Tennessee football, for example. You guys knowing that, being in the region. I mean, I think it's exceptional what they've done, losing the guy that they kind of banked on. And then you bring in another guy that, that's turned out well for those guys. But that could have not turned out well had it not been for, them having another ace in the hole. And I will say this, it's easier for the Tennessees and the Alabamas to do that than, say, the Northeast, because, there are going to be kids that grow up that say, hey, I want to play for Tennessee or I want to play for Alabama. That's not necessarily the case with us or a mid-major or something like that, unless there's something really unusual. So, that's kind of an overview of where we are now, but it's different, and it's constantly changing. So you've got to really, really keep your, kind of your lures in the water for any kind of information that could help, your roster in case it changes, for sure.
I want to ask you one more thing. I'll turn to Howie and let him ask a couple of questions. You had trips when you played Georgia Tech and Samford, and of course you went to Chocolaca Park to play Jacksonville State. How was the crowds? How was the family and fan base that traveled with the team? Was it good?
Pretty solid. At all places. I was real pleased with what we had at Oxford. Obviously, that's a little bit easier for us because it's only maybe an hour and a half away. Atlanta was good, and I think our parents told me, some of them, that we had some of them had a bomb threat on I-75 that they had to stay. They got stuck in. Prior to getting there. Some of them got there a little late. They came, they stayed. One of them put on social media, I don't know why anybody would live in Atlanta. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it was, I understand, especially having to go through that, but they certainly, they certainly kind of weathered the elements. We had bad weather yesterday and they came anyway. So we were pleased that we had some recruits there yesterday and recruits on Friday night. That was good. Some of them traveled, multiple hours to get there. So we've been, and some people traveled even when we went to Louisiana. So, Birmingham, we had some former players, not only at Northeast, but, from other schools we've been at, UAB. So that was good to see. The support's been really good. We're pleased with that for sure.
Well, Coach, I'm impressed with the uniforms. You'd said y'all was kind of sort of in a practice uniform, but I like the uniforms. Michael Perkins took several pictures and, had some good photos. They look good. I mean, and I think I like Northeast color base. I mean, it's really stands out and it really looked good. What did you think of the uniform?
Yeah, good color base. And how that all came about was Courtney Design made multiple designs. With last year's team, she put up, multiple options. I think we ended up with maybe 7 or 8 different, combos, and they voted for the top 3. We'll probably add, maybe 1 or 2 more in the next year to 2 years. We're kind of with 3 right now, but yeah, we felt pretty good. But as far as what we ended up picking, that was the players. And as far as who designed it, that was more Courtney with the Adidas folks getting it done. And Barbara Kilgore, who was our former athletic director, who's now moved on to workforce development, who's very artistic, also had, a big hand in the logo. So not really my area of expertise, but I do know how it went about. And, I'm pleased with how the product came out for sure.
Well, I want to ask you about this too. I know, did you get to visit much with the coaching staffs of the competing teams? Did you get any feedback from them?
Yeah, it's been really positive, everywhere we've been. Obviously, we performed, with the exception of yesterday, at a manner where you would expect that. There's several, we've got some things lined up in the spring for follow-ups with coaches from multiple schools. Anytime you can play, either tie, beat, or be close to, a team, you know, uh, that's going to spark interest. And we've had some good individual performances. We've got some kids that are starting to get famous a little bit, which is good. We definitely want to advertise that. So yeah, all that has been good, and it's a real familiar atmosphere with our staff and theirs because we've played against each other at the 4-year level for years. So it's not like we're kind of trying to cold call them. They know what we're about. They know what kind of players we produce, and that helps us immensely. And obviously, it helps us when our players perform too, which they have overall. So that's been a good thing. Absolutely.
Well, one other thing I want to ask, and I'll turn how is, you're getting toward the end of the season, and I know a lot of recruiting is going on. When you get through with the season, are you and Courtney kind of sort of step away and kind of wind down just a little bit?
We do. One of the things that is an advantage is, we'll try to mix in. We've got a tournament that we've got to cover in Clearwater. Obviously, that's a good area. It's cool. I used to live in Tampa. Tampa, for me, was always best in December and January. So we're gonna add on a couple days there. We're going down to the coast for Thanksgiving this year. So that just kind of throwing that in there when you can. It's real taxing. We train a lot of kids up in the area, from local as far away as Ohio. So we've got that going on. After Thanksgiving starts. So yeah, you need to kind of smoke it when you got it for sure. So we're tagging some of that in there. I know I like to get up to East Tennessee, during the holidays. I feel like that's a beautiful area, one of the most kind of underrated places, whether it's Chattanooga or you get further up into, Gatlinburg, Johnson City, Knoxville. All those are really cool places to be. Kind of the right mixture of it's cold, there are some mountains, but it's not the white Christmas of, Pennsylvania that I used to experience, which is a little too white for me. Um, so those kind of places are kind of on the list, and you definitely need to throw it in because, when we start in January, it is full throttle until May. And I've just got a little bit of time after the season ends. Hopefully, it goes all the way up to a championship game. But either way, I'll have a little bit of turnaround, and then, I'm coaching in Chattanooga again this summer. So you got to mix it in when you can, for sure.
Okay, Howie.
Yeah, Coach, y'all was talking about the uniforms and everything, and I popped a picture up. I don't know if you saw it or not.
I
Is that one
did.
of the uniforms for this year?
That's the one I think we were using Friday night at Georgia Tech. We used that as a road uniform last year. We've got another one that's kind of a navy version, and then the white pinstripe. Those are kind of the three that we've utilized. And the navy one, I think, if memory serves me right, kind of has that, that light blue sleeve, kind of like this, mixed in there. We didn't do one that had, this color, as kind of the predominant, which I think is kind of a cool mix, especially, up against the navy. But that leaves something to do in the future for sure.
Yeah, in my opinion, with the gray there, it's hard to go wrong with that type of charcoal gray color.
We were fortunate. Adidas did a good job. They've been, we've dealt with them at multiple places where we've been. Real pleased with them, and BSN helped us out quite a bit. Kind of as middleman there. Real pleased with how that came out for sure.
All right, well, Coach, I want to ask you this: when y'all deal with Adidas, do the players getting a certain amount of memorabilia with Northeast on it? Are they allotted a certain amount of stuff?
Yeah, and that kind of comes with it. It sort of comes. We get a lot of overflow with with our contract from those guys. So, like for example, footwear wise, they'll get a molded cleat, they'll get a metal cleat, they'll get a turf shoe, they'll get a travel shoe. They get all our batting helmets, gloves, bats, all that is done. The catcher's gear, all that's done through a company, Marucci, out of Louisiana. We've been able to get a really good deal with those guys. They're a little bit more well known in baseball, but they've signed up some really good clients on the softball side here recently. Whether it's Georgia or Texas State or Texas Tech in the past. They've kind of slowly started to get in there. They've got a really good bat this year we've been pleased with. So, all of that has been good. They're a little bit like us, an upstart program. So they've cut us some really good deals. But, yeah, I mean, our kids, there's no difference, zero difference between what our kids are getting here and what they had at Louisiana or UAB or some of the places I've been. Now, it's not on the same level of, say, a Texas A&M or a Penn State, but I would say it's equivalent to, like a mid-major D1 for sure.
Coach, here's the other picture that we got with the color combination of is that like a baby blue, light blue, and white?
Yeah, and that one's more, I think if memory serves me right, more of like a practice shirt we decided to roll with one day. That may end up being kind of an alternative uniform down the road. But yeah, that's the baby blue that we're probably going to work in another, jersey down the road that kind of looks that way. But that would be more of a Courtney question as to how soon. But yeah, that's kind of the combo that I prefer that just myself. But yeah, that's kind of down the road for sure.
Coach, when you gonna let that happen? Let Courtney come on here.
It's tough on Mondays because she always does lessons on Monday, and then I do daddy time. Our kids are scattered to the winds today. I just hadn't caught you guys on a good day because we played yesterday. They need some much needed time off, so we kind of missed it that way. But yeah, I would certainly. The problem is it's not interchangeable in terms of me doing pitching and her doing this because the kids would be wasting their time if I did it. But yeah, we'd have to kind of prearrange that for sure. But Monday's probably her worst day for sure.
Can I pop those pictures back up and you tell us who was quote unquote the models of those uniforms?
Yeah. So that's Chloe Hatch there from Rainsville. That's a sophomore, with us that, had an all-conference year last year. She normally starts in left field for us. Good player. And then the other one that you popped up, that's Olivia Acuff. She's from Lafayette, not too, in Georgia, not too far away from us. Good player, Lafayette High, played for the Atlanta Vipers organization. Very pleased to have, both of those kids, on our team for sure.
That's like I said, you can't go wrong with that gray there. It seems like more and more, not just high schools, but college teams are going to that type of gray. I think I've seen Tennessee bring out that color of gray as well on the football field.
Yeah, it's an alternative uniform, and I think just kind of get a little different look every once in a while. I think it looks good. Because
Absolutely.
and the biggest thing is the reason they do it. It's marketing, number one. I mean, they're going to sell some of that color, but recruits love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've been fortunate to, I remember, when I was at Marion Military Institute, when we started, almost 20 years ago, we were lucky to get any type of uniform possible. It was just bare bones budget. Things have changed. Obviously at Northeast, we're real fortunate financially, but the other thing is that, the 2-year system as a whole is much healthier than it was when I left the first time in 2013. So, things like uniforms, things like being able to take, trips in the fall. We could not do those things, 10, 15 years ago. I think that speaks to the health of the system. I think it speaks to the leadership of, the chancellor and then obviously at our place with Dr. Campbell. I think he understands, he wants everything to be number one, but he understands kind of, athletics being, the front porch of where we are. So, that stuff's been really good. And obviously how you look and being, marketing is a big deal. It's always been a big deal. it's particularly a big deal now with so many more sources like, your show, social media being combined with the show. There's just a million ways, now that you've got to constantly get out there because, I was against it for years, didn't like social media, but that's where we are now. You've got to adapt, into that and find a way to get your message out and stay in the game for sure. So, yeah, we appreciate, things like this show and the support that we have to have uniforms like that, and then the ability to talk about them.
The other color that a lot of kids enjoy is a black uniform. Do y'all have a black uniform as well?
We don't. None of that as of now. Yeah, I don't know what the plans will be, as we go forward, but yeah, nothing in the immediate future for that for sure.
Some reason I think that black and baby blue would go good together on some type of uniform.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, I think as we're trying to, establish a team and a winning, kind of like, when I was at Penn State, that brand is well known. And when you think of Penn State, at least if you're as old as me or older, you're going to think of the black shoes, the iconic jerseys, and probably Joe Paterno pops in there somewhere. If you're my age or older, you're going to think of, I guess Saban has transformed this a little bit, but Alabama kind of still has that, thought process with the Crimson and, Bear Bryant. And then obviously Saban has a lot to do with that now. Those logos, everybody, for me, and I may offend people from Texas when I say this, but when you see the Power T, you think Tennessee, being the orange T being here. I don't mind saying that because I was at A&M. I don't have any love for Texas anyway. So, the Vols can be happy. But yeah, I think those things, as coaches, we're X's and O's people, but I do think, especially that's changed since I started branding, getting your message out. That's a different world than we were in 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Not that it wasn't always out there, but it's out there so much more. The eye is seeing more than it was. So, yeah, you've got to be on point with that. I've seen it done really well, at some places like A&M, like Penn State. Big money spent on recruiting and spent wisely, with things like branding. I've seen it done not that great, some places I've been. So it's important, because kids are going to be out there looking at it. I do think sometimes we spend a little too much time on that and not enough on the actual product through the recruiting process and all that. But I do think it's important, and we try to do that, to the best of our ability for sure.
Well, Coach, speaking of, branding is very important to athletics now, because it's not like it used to be. Because I remember when I was young, like Tennessee would have the Big Orange Barbecue. One year I went, got a picture took with Reggie White. The next year I went back, he autographed the picture for me. I got Bear Bryant's autograph one time, met him at a bookstore, and my dad took me. You don't have that involvement between fans, players, and coaches anymore. So branding is very important. And like, for instance, and y'all may do this in the future, you may have a Navy out where all fans wear Navy. And because that, to me, like when Tennessee has the orange out or they checkerboard the end zone, that gets fans more involved with the game because they don't get to spend time with the coaches and players anymore like it was in the past.
Yeah, at our level, we can do a little bit more of that. I feel like there's rarely a time I don't go into a restaurant in, Scottsboro or Fort Payne or Rainsville where there isn't some kind of conversation, because we're smaller and we still have a little of that. But I understand what you're saying. I mean, at some of the other places I've been, I thought, I got to Penn State in 2013. It was not unheard of, even in the post-Sandusky era, to see coaches out in the community. I think James Franklin did a really good job of that when he was there. But as I moved, I got to A&M in 22, so it was almost 10 years later. Far more remote moved, and I'm not saying that to criticize Jimbo Fisher or any of those guys, but it just changed. I think, there, and we've changed a little bit as a society too. I can't imagine that Josh Heupel or Kalen DeBoer or Mario Cristobal or any of those guys, if I had their job, I don't know how much I'd just be out in the public. So I think, that a lot of people were scratched their heads when Saban kind of was the first to hire almost for lack of a better term, a chief of staff. That was unheard of back in the day. And you almost have to have that because they're a public figure now. And so, your brand's going to speak for you. Your messages you put out are going to speak for you. And everybody's going to do that a little differently, but it certainly's got to be out there and managed and tailored a little bit, to make sure that you're staying kind of in the message war for sure.
I was sitting here listening to you talk about the uniforms and everything, and I got to thinking about the two schools that you mentioned, Alabama and Penn State. They've got the same uniforms the whole time. They don't have no throwback uniforms or the old rustic type thing. It's crimson white and navy and white for both of those schools.
Yeah, and I think I've been fortunate to have been a part of both of those athletic departments. As a baseball player at Alabama, and then as a softball coach at Penn State, and the one thing that is similar in both of those cultures is kind of a grinded out mentality, but it leads towards championships. Both of those schools, very much emphasize championships. I've been at other places that maybe they were emphasizing something else. I think Alabama does a really good job. The whole, legends are made thing, which is, the entire message of the university, not just the athletic department, but I think that's kind of on point given what the athletic department has been able to do. So, those are things, 40 years ago, when I was a kid and maybe you got on the, Auburn and Tennessee are playing and you see a school ad and you may not think that much about it. Now it's very much, it's almost like a movie preview, that they're putting out there. So, there's a lot of competition for that market, and, you've got to make sure you're constantly adapting for that, for sure.
Been on the campus. Let's get back to your team. We got a little off subject there. We get back to your softball squad playing at Georgia Tech this past weekend. Was you able to carry the girls up the road there to the varsity and let them enjoy that experience there?
No, I think I had one conversation about the varsity with our bus driver. Unfortunately, it's, I mentioned the bomb threat, coming in, which didn't affect us, but I found out later, affected our parents. A lot of protests around the area, during that weekend. I'm sad to say that, at least in the inner city area where we were kind of thinking about getting in, getting out. I mean, Georgia Tech's got a great campus, great program, good coaches. Really, really, indebted to them for letting us go over there and do that. But, yeah, there's some outside things I really don't want to deal with a whole lot. So it's a little bit, it's just kind of a byproduct, unfortunately, of where we are right now. But yeah, I would love to have done the varsity, but wasn't in the cards this time for sure.
Been down at Sanford and some of the other places. Have you been able to let the girls go get out a little bit and kind of explore some?
Not on that trip a lot. Now they, we got to see a portion of the campus. That campus is not super big, but it's a beautiful campus. Even when, we're able to roll up through where the football stadium is and softball. So that was good for them. At some of the other places we were, McNeese, Louisiana Tech, where it's a little bit longer trip, we could do that. The Georgia Techs and the Chocolacos and the Sanfords you mentioned, Troy, we're kind of just whipping out because it was just a day deal. But the overnight one, we could spend a little more time. I don't want to say we explored, but we could at least kind of get our bearings on the area. I wish we had more time to do some of that stuff. We were able to, go to a Cajun restaurant just off of where McNeese was. I think that was a good experience for our kids. But yeah, it just, it's tough because you're on a really, really tight schedule when you're going on the road. But they have been able to see, some of that stuff. And I think that's why the 4 years like to have it there rather than coming to our place. Really grateful to Jacksonville State that they were flexible enough for us to do it at Chocolaco because, we play the Junior College World Series there for the next 3 years. So we wanted to get a chance to play on that field. prior to the season. So, I appreciate that because, they could have easily said no and we come to Jacksonville State, which would have been fine too. But, I appreciate them doing that. That was good of that program to come down to Oxford for sure.
Did you tell the girls that this is where you wanted to end the season at there at Chockalocka?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we mentioned that, right away that this is a big reason why we're doing it. And, we need to remember the lessons, from yesterday because we need to play a lot better, A, to get there, and B, to win it. So, but I certainly think we're capable of doing that. We just got to continue to improve for sure.
Hey, on some of these road trips, just tell Chris to hammer down a little bit harder on the bus there. That way, y'all have more time wherever you're going to.
Well, he does a really good job. Yeah, I'm amazed. He's doing that for us, and he's doing it for every team in our department. It's amazing what he's been able to pull off. Really grateful to him for, what he's put into, the department in general and to our program.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about the conversation y'all had coming back from Birmingham, and Carla texted me and said, "Hey, I was talking to Coach Guthrie about the show and all that." I've known Carla for longer than she probably wants me to admit it, but yeah, Carla and Chris are great people, and I know Chris is really looking forward to this upcoming school season or sports season, carrying Northeast everywhere, and I know he gets a big kick out of it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I can't say enough of what he does for not only our program, but just the school in general. He's a just very, very valuable member of our team at Northeast for sure.
Well, Coach, we appreciate your time. Phil, you got anything before we let Coach go?
No, well, I will tell you this, Coach. I have talked to Dr. Campbell, and he's agreed to come on our podcast. So here in the near future, he couldn't do it here the first of the week because I was going to try to maybe do it before we had you come on, but he's out of town at a meeting and won't be back till tomorrow, I think he said.
Okay.
So we're going to try to get him on and, and kind of play up and, kind of get his story about how he's gotten where he's at and what maybe the future holds for Northeast College. So I'm excited about having him come on.
Me too. I'm glad you told me that because it certainly is a pretty incredible story. He has left his imprint. I think not only on the community but in the state of Alabama. I've known a lot of presidents in the 2-year system. In the almost 10 years in 2 places that I've been. Of course, I was obviously still very much in contact with the 2-year system when I was at UAB for 4 years. So a lot of experience, with various presidents, and there's nobody even close, in my opinion, to what he's done. And, if they ever give out a legacy president award or anything like that, when he's done, he certainly should, it's kind of like the Vince Lombardi trophy in the Super Bowl. He's really done well. I posted the other day, a YouTube video I ran across of a documentary he did on, the former Congressman Bob Jones, was born here in Scottsboro. And what a tremendous amount of knowledge, as a former history teacher. And, people forget about that because he's been an administrator for a long time. But just kind of a Renaissance man guy. He's in the Jackson County Sports Hall of Fame. Done a lot of things, in his time. And certainly somebody to look up to and emulate. And, he's really a treasure for sure.
Yeah, he was a teacher when I was at Northeast when I started in 1985. When I was there, and yeah, and when you talk about, and this is not a knock on people that has their names on buildings, but a lot of people do have their names on buildings. But Dr. Campbell has built that legacy where he has his stamp no matter where it goes. He don't have to have his name on anything. He's one of those people when you talk about him, you don't even have to say his name, and you know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm glad that I got the opportunity to work for him. And he was a big reason why I came here. And I knew that almost instantly, when I interviewed with him, I'm like, this guy's different, in a good way. And, I've worked at a lot of different places. I've been, fortunate to be with some really, really, really good people at some really high level, places. And he's right up there with anybody I've ever been with. So you can see it in what we're doing at Northeast, not only in softball, but just as a school and an athletic department in general, and who he hires. And, and how he lets them do their job. So, very, very indebted to him for this opportunity and what we get to do here every day.
Yeah, when me and Chrissy came to the softball game, the first game of the year, we were driving around, and Chrissy says, "I don't recognize a lot of this." And she went to nursing school there about 20 years ago, and she goes, "It looks a whole lot different." I said, "Just think about me." As you know, I said, "It's a whole lot different looking campus than when I was here." But it's a beautiful campus now, and and with the softball and the soccer fields going up, it really adds a lot to the campus.
It does, and it's a lot different. I've only been here since 23, and it's a lot different than when I got here. It's really changed. That, as where our fields are was a park. Then it's really changed rapidly. Dr. Campbell put this out last week. We've got some signage up for track and cross country locker rooms. That's been something we've completed within this school year. Soccer, I went by today. They're actually on the field practicing. If it's not their first time, it's one of the first times. That makes it look different now. It's not just a construction site anymore. You see the kids coming out of the locker room onto the field doing their thing. So I feel really good for those guys, and it adds something to our campus. It looks like an athletic kind of a Division I village back there.
Yeah, and the good thing for the soccer program, they're starting to have some victories. I think things are starting to go their way. I know I went to the soccer match, and it seems like something would bad would the game I went to, leading with about 4 minutes to go and gave up a goal to make it 2-2. But this team's starting to see some success.
Yeah, it's people don't understand. I do, because I've done it twice. When you start he's not dealing. That's not a fully recruitable roster yet. He needs another year. The fact that they're going to get in the conference tournament, I think that's hats off to Tom and his staff, for what they've done. It's very, very difficult, doing it. Our year two has always been a lot better than year one, at both places we've done it at, whether it was Marion or here. And I was telling Tom, because, he's used to winning big, at Fort Payne High School. And, I'm like, dude, just take it from me. It takes, it's just radically different after that first year. And, but I'm glad to see them, kind of finish strong here, because that's only going to help them as they move forward.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to help them in recruiting too. Also, especially when you have that positive energy, and they're starting to get that. People's getting excited. Well, Coach, one more thing is, next spring you'll have the season starting. What about things like when is information going to come out about season tickets and those type of things? When will Northeast kind of sort of release that kind of information?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very soon. We're finalizing. We've got all the dates. We're trying to work through a couple time things. I can tell everybody that, we've got a huge tournament in February, which I think is our second weekend out. We've got McLennan from Texas, who's perennially a top 5 team, from Waco coming in. They'll be very good. We're going to play 3 games with them. We'll have Georgia Highlands come in. This is just kind of the highlights of the non-conference schedule. We'll do a home and home with Roane State, who's usually pretty good out of Tennessee. We'll do a home and home with Walters out of Tennessee, who's usually very good. One of our former players is a coach on that staff. So we'll take a road trip up to Vol State, which is another good team, that's usually nationally ranked. So, we're going to continue to play really good teams, whether it's at our level or beyond that. And then obviously we have a challenging, conference schedule with 2 teams that made the national tournament last year in it. So it'll be fun. We're looking forward to the challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah, because playing teams like Walters, Volunteer State, and Roane State, and then like even you're not far from Chattanooga State either. All those are perennial playoff teams in that junior college level.
Yeah, I mean, you just gotta. We did that. A lot of people criticize us for it when Jimmy was the head coach at UAB. I mean, we played in year 2. We played Oklahoma State, Washington, Georgia, Louisiana Lafayette, Ole Miss. We played all those guys, early on, and it made us better. It made us better, and we knocked some of those teams off. So, I just think, I'm a big believer. I'm not a cupcake guy. I think you play the best to be as good as you can be, and you're not going to get better by playing teams that aren't as good. So that's what we want to do to be as good as we can be, for sure.
Coach, I still plan on coming by the practice facility one day, just to stand in the batter's box, and hopefully they won't hit me, but just see what those softballs look like coming towards you.
Well, come on, let us know when you guys can do it, and we'd love to have you for sure.
I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I don't want to swing no stick or nothing. I just want to see what a batter, what it looks like when a batter's in there and the ball's coming, a rise ball, a drop ball, a fastball, curveball. Somebody that can give me a little bit of everything when it comes to pitching wise. I just want to stand there and see what it looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, come on down. We'd love to have you guys.
I'll be more than happy to come over there. And who you got left as far as this fall schedule goes?
So Sunday, we have UAH in Huntsville, 2:00, and then we have one more game scheduled on November 6th at our place. I believe we're going to start that at 1 p.m. And that's Arizona Storm, Walding. That's a travel team. His daughter. We have his daughter Sierra's on our team now from Phoenix. They're a really good team. They play all over the country. And then we've got some other kids that are coming, from that organization. So, we're excited about that. And it's been a good partnership with Sierra and her dad. And they're going to play in Scenic City immediately following playing us. So it's a good kind of tune up for them, and we get to see some of their players and show off the facility. And, we're looking forward to it for sure.
Well, Coach,
Two
are you
more
getting a
games.
lot of good interest out of the Chattanooga area as far as players go?
Well, yeah, obviously, with Addie, on this year's team and Bree Wilson and Olivier Cuff and, Kaylee Warnock the year before out of Dade County. I guess you could consider that Greater Chattanooga. So, yeah, we've done well. We've got, I can't mention them until after November 1st, but we have some more for next year that have committed to us that are very good players. So that area has been very good for us, very good for us. We've started to venture a little bit more toward Atlanta because obviously that's going to be that they're always good. But Chattanooga, Northwest Georgia between it, Chattanooga, Atlanta, Huntsville, those are all really good areas. But Chattanooga is as good as it is in the country. I don't know if there's ever been a place where I haven't been or where I've been where we have not had Chattanooga on the radar. I mean, I've recruited. It's one of the few places I can say, no matter where I've been, I've recruited Chattanooga every single year. So and that just is because the volume of talent there, and I don't think it's any different, these days for sure.
The last game you got is going to be at home. Is it going to be like the others? No admission, just come and enjoy the game?
Yes. Yeah. We're just going to, open it up. I think we're going to play 10 innings. It'll be pretty loose, get our kids some looks and go from there for sure.
Good deal. Well, you'll be back on here before then, so we'll get that information out a little bit more when you come back on here. So, Coach, we appreciate your time. Sound like everything's falling in place in this fall. No pun intended with all the fall references there, but
Sure.
seems like everything's kind of lining up for you and getting ready for your schedule to kick off in February.
Yeah, we're just looking to continue to improve, and we got a lot of work to do. But yeah, it's been good so far. Absolutely.
Awesome. We appreciate your time. And earlier you said it was our show, but it's actually your show, the Northeast Softball Show. So, it's a we, not a us. It's a we. So we're all in here together. So when you win, we win. When you lose, we lose. And when our show bombs, it's you bomb with us too. I guess you can say. I don't know, but anyway, we appreciate your time, and I will be out there in the next week to 2 weeks just to see what's going on. And I haven't been to the field yet. I'm looking forward to seeing the field, and I've heard Phil talk about it on multiple occasions, and looking forward to getting the. If I can't get the grand tour, maybe I can get the baby grand tour then and see everything.
Yeah, well, we'll look forward to having you guys for sure. I appreciate you having us on. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, the big thing to me is promoting these young ladies and the families in this community because Northeast is just such a huge part of the Northeast community.
Yeah, it's been good, and we're fortunate to have a lot of kids, particularly on this roster. I don't know if it'll shake out like that every single year, but we've got a lot of kids, within an hour from Greater Chattanooga to the 2-county area. we've just been fortunate to have a lot of those kids, and we've obviously had kids from beyond that, but good mix of kids for sure.
Awesome. Looking forward to talking to you in 2 weeks, Coach. Best of luck between now and then. And as always, if we can do anything for you, let us know. And of course, before we let you get going, any shout outs tonight?
Yeah, just want to thank everybody for all the support and good traveling throughout the fall, and be on the lookout for. I don't know. Jimmy would be the one to know exactly when we're going to post ticket information, schedule. My general information would be before January. I would expect probably more within the next week to or I should say 4 to 6 weeks, somewhere in there. So we'll see. That'd be more of his question, but definitely stay tuned, because once we blast it out, it'll be everywhere. And, I expect it to go fast, especially with some of the headway we made this fall.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And I was come close to saying that you may sell out the season this year.
Yeah. Well, we did well last year. We want to capitalize on that. I know Jimmy's got a couple of fundraiser projects that he'll be talking about, as we get a little closer to the season. But yeah, I think we'll have a really good atmosphere there.
Well, maybe we can approach Jimmy again and get him to come back on when that thing comes, and maybe he can let us know a lot of those promotions and what his ideas are coming into the spring. So that may be a good time to get him back on, man.
That'd be a good show for you guys for sure, because he's got a lot of things up his sleeve that he'd want to talk about. And I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but I know that'd be good.
Yeah.
One last question, and you may not know the answer. Merchandise, Northeast merchandise for the softball team and everything. Do you know if there's any in the bookstore where some can be picked up at or anything like that?
There is in the bookstore, and again, there's a link that I've got out on my website. I probably need to refresh or not on my website, on my Facebook pages and X accounts. Haven't posted that in a while, but it's kind of it's an ongoing store as part of some of the contracted clothing, apparel people that we deal with. So either one of those two ways are available to get merchandise.
Awesome.
Yeah. If you'll post that, I'll share it on River-City-Media. Maybe get some interest in that out there.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. I appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate it, Coach. For Phil Harris, I'm Howard Cheney, and as always, the star of the show, Coach Joe Guthrie of the Northeast Alabama Lady Mustang softball. Best of luck in the coming weeks, Joe, and if we can do anything, let us know.
All right. Thanks, guys. Y'all have a good night.
Y'all too. Good night, everybody.